Welcome to Marion's World, everyone, where you're about to see me make the most perfect pair of shoes ever made out of some garden string and scrap fabric twine. I can't believe I've done it, but I have, and they're lovely. I hope you enjoy. I'm about to make my second shoe. This is the one I've already made, and I have put a sole on that came from a thrifted trainer. But up until I did that, it was a perfectly serviceable shoe, except I couldn't have gone outside in it properly without a proper sole on. And so I had to cover up all my beautiful sole that I'd made. But I'm going to show you the whole process, because I know there's probably not many people who are going to be wanting to make their own crocheted string fabric twine shoe. But for those of you who are out there, this is how you do it. So my supplies are fabric twine, garden string, and I came up with the idea of crocheting a sole. And I'll show you how I've done this foundation chain to make the sole. You need something strong to sew it with. I've got this vintage button thread, which is really strong, and that's what I've used to sew my sole together. I've got some polyester wax thread, which I've used to sew the trainer sole onto the bottom of my shoe, and I used vintage crochet thread to sew my shoe together. And I also have a felt sole. So these are from the same company that I made my slippers from, and I knew they had this really thick sturdy felt, and so in the end I bought the two soles, and that's what I based my shoe sole on. So to start off, you need your 10 meters of crocheted string. I'm using a 5.5mm crochet hook, which in old money says size 5 on there. And for those of you who don't know what a crocheted foundation chain is, I'll just put that bit out of the way so you can see on my white what I'm doing. So normally if people go to start and do crochet, and I am crocheting right-handed, you might just be doing a chain like that and pulling the loop through every time. And then you would go back in and start and do your trebles or your double crochets, whatever it was. A foundation chain takes away having this chain first, because you're doing the first piece of double or single crochet wherever you are in the world. Double crochet for the UK, single crochet for the USA. And you do it all in once. So there's my chain. So I go back into where the bottom of this is, and there's like a V, there's a chain going along the bottom. So I'll go over my hook and pull through. I've got two on my hook. I'll go over and pull through one, and then go over and pull through two. And what I've done is I've effectively done a double crochet onto my single chain, all in one go, which means in reality that I didn't have to figure out how many chains I needed. If I was short, I could do some more without having to worry about it, and if I did too many, I just needed to pull it back, because it's all one thing. So I'll do that again. It didn't take very long either. So I'm going to go back into the V of the one I've just done. You can see there's my chain. Go back into that V and go over and pull through one, over, pull through one, which gets you back up to the top, and then over and pull through two, and you're back with a chain. Go back into the bottom, over, pull through, over, pull through one, over, pull through two. And you do get a tighter piece on the bottom, and I feel I'm loose on the top. I think that's to do with the fact that it's string, and I did keep pulling it to stretch it out. But of course, once I've done enough, I can just let that loop lie, work from the other end, and as I say, if I haven't got enough, I can just carry on, or I can pull it back. So in the end, I've got 10 meters here. And I came up with this idea. I've been wanting to do shoes for ages. I kept thinking, oh, rope soles. I could make a rope sole myself. And then but I didn't have any rope. And I kept thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden I thought, why don't I just crochet the garden string, and I could get a thickness. Because at first I kept thinking, would I twine it? And I started to actually twine the string together to see if I could get a thick enough piece that would be rope. And that didn't seem to work either. And so the crochet has worked very well indeed. And so what I decided to do, so that's the inside. I've already done my right foot, so this is the left foot. I need to attach my string onto the bottom of this felt. This is why I needed to have something thick, because you couldn't really sew a sole just on a thin bit of felt. And so I started from the outside edge, and I started at the instep with my strong button thread, and I just started sewing it down, just right on the edge of the sole. And I thought if I started on the outside and went inwards, that would mean that I would get it packed tight, because there'd be no point if it just all disintegrated. And so I go through, pick up the chain at the bottom, and then come back through my thick sole. So I've got a long needle with a really sharp point on here, and I kept the tight edge to be the underneath, so that everything was always, I was always aware of packing things in. Just round and round. You can see it's going in there, and that'll stand up in the end. And just overcast that chain on. I'm trying not to stretch the string, because I want a solid sole. I don't want it to just collapse under the weight of me standing on it and being used and walked on. It has to stand up to being used, or else there's no point in me going to the effort. So I'm just overcasting it actually. So that was the best way. But down through the thick felt. So I'll carry on doing the first outside part, and I'll come back when I'm filling it in. Well, I've got all the way round, and I've made sure that the string is not hanging over the edge of the sole, because I don't want the sole to be wider than the shoe. And so that's also why I kept the tight edge downwards, which that'll be the part that hits the ground rather than the part that's upwards, and that means that the sole's not going to splay outwards. Now I've got back to the instep, and now I need to make sure that that's outside and that my string carries on inside. And the whole idea is that I'm going to keep curling this round like that and filling in my sole shape until I've got it tight. Now I realised that if I did it too loose, there wouldn't be enough structure there. And so how I came up with a method in the end was to go through into the middle and leave that to just sew in right at the end. And I just take my needle down through the sole and make a little running stitch and come right back up through the string. But what I do is I lie it almost on top of the other one, so that each row is very, very close together. As the sole gets more tight with the amounts of rows, that's what's going to make a sturdy sole. At the tight end of the heel, it's easier to come up and down because there isn't enough room to take a running stitch. So I just stab stitched it through, made sure that those rows are tight together, and then keep going. It doesn't matter that it's out like that at the moment, because at the end I'm going to tighten it all up. So if it's easier to flatten it out, then flatten it out, because that's the way you're going to get a nice sturdy sole to walk on. And when I put the other one on, when it was done, it was like walking on a cloud. It felt so lovely. And then the whole point was, it was lovely to walk on, but I felt, well, I'll not be able to go outside because it's just garden string, and I won't be able to walk on it very much before the string starts to disintegrate on the pavement. And what happens when it's wet? I won't have any, I won't be able to walk out in it. And so that made me think, well, all I've actually done is make a slipper. And it was important to me that I did make a shoe. And so then I started to look at how I could make a proper sole that I could walk outside in. But in the meantime, you can see this is not a difficult thing to do. It's just coming up through the felt and pulling firmly. So I don't want anything to be loosey-goosey, but I just want it to be nice and firmly sewn on, and everything buttered up to the row before. I'll continue on and wait until I'm nearly in the middle. So I've made 4 rounds. I'm on to my 5th round, and you can see it's getting narrow inside. And it was about at this stage on the first one that I could get a sense that the idea of the crocheted string was going to work, because I could feel it getting solid. You can see my stitches on the inside, so this is where my foot will be. But when you get to here, you just have to be careful, but you're still able to come up on the inside and just stab stitch right the way down. And as long as you're catching the string every time, then that's perfectly fine. So now I'm back down to the heel, and I've got my excess here, but because it's just a foundation chain, it's as easy as just pulling it back. What I'll do, I'll pull that back to there and I'll cut it so I can get the excess off out the way. So that just can be back on my garden string. I'll just wind that up, and then I can just pull this until I have it exactly fitting in, and I'll just pull the end through the loop to secure it and cut it nicely back with the tail, because the tail can hide down in the sole. I'll push that in, and I will carry on sewing. Okay, so that's all of the sole actually attached to the felt, and as you can see, I'm still a bit very splayed out. So to get this really solid, I started to actually shape it. So I'll just come out to the side, and what I started to do is just hold it together, and I sewed sideways as far as my needle would go, and just started pulling things in. So, and out to the other side. I'll put my thimble on, I think, and pulling, and then taking a stitch, sort of about a 1/2 inch stitch, going back to the middle, back through to the other side, and pulling it in. And all of a sudden you start to get a really sturdy sole, and so you can actually do quite a bit of shaping here to get it actually the shape that your sole is. Now originally I drew around my foot to get the shape, and then I ended up buying the thick felt sole, and pull, and go downwards to get the heel in, like that. And you can actually do quite a bit of moulding it together. I found it quite enjoyable to be sort of shaping it, because I could feel it getting better and better under my hands. And once I had a rough shape of it, I then went back and forward till I knew that it was nicely tight and everything was looking like it should. I made sure I was coming through the top of everything as well, because the bottom was sewn on, so it was the top that needed to be together. And it just sort of pulls in, keep it under tension, and then this little bit gets sewn at the same time, this little instep part. And if you've got an outer sole, sort of a rubber sole to go on, you can actually shape this to go to the sole you've got. But when I first did my first one, I didn't have, because I hadn't worked that bit out yet. So I was just lucky that it all fit together. You can just sort of put it down and hold it while you bring the sides in. And every time you go, it gets better and better and more sturdy, like a proper shoe sole. I ended up at 3 different cobblers. One kept referring me to another place, and then that was to another place. I ended up at a really good one in Newcastle, and he just said there was nothing I could get. I kept thinking, is there not a solution I can paint on the bottom that would make them waterproof? And he said no, there wasn't, but I could buy a sole, and I didn't want to buy a sole because I actually thought that the string looked so lovely like that. I didn't actually want to cover it up, and so I was resisting covering it up for ages. So the cobbler said there was nothing I could get, and I said I see online there's things that you can paint on, and he said yes, but it'll not be good enough for, you won't get enough wear out of it. Your best bet is to buy a sheet of soling and then cut them out. And I said, and how am I going to put that on? He said, well, you'll have to get the adhesive, you'll have to get shoe adhesive or epoxy like 2-part adhesive. And I didn't really want to put adhesive on my lovely crocheted sole either. And then all of a sudden, I was in a charity shop looking for something else, and I happened to see this pair of trainers, and what I noticed was that the top was stitched on, and you can see on this sole, because I've taken it apart, you can see the stitching line here. And when I looked, there was my size, a size 5, which is what this is, a size 5. And right on the spur of the moment, I took the chance of getting them, thinking maybe I could take them apart and maybe I could use that as an outer sole, even though I didn't really want to cover my string up, because I think it's quite cool. But I didn't want to have to cover that up, but I definitely wanted to wear them outside. And so in the end, I thought, right, just do it. You've still made a shoe. It doesn't matter that you're covering up the string. It's still making a lovely, soft, springy sole to be stepping on, and you'll have still made a shoe even though you're using the sole off a trainer. And so that's what I ended up doing. So now I've got a sole. And so the next thing for me was to make the upper. I actually did the heel, and I sewed the heel on. I did the heel with it, so if you want to do this and you don't want to bother with an outer to go outside, you can definitely turn these into a heeled slipper. That took 1 metre. And it's sewn exactly the same, except I didn't sew it through a base of felt, I just sewed it to itself. And then I sewed it on, and so then I I had a proper heeled shoe sole, and it really felt nice. It felt nice to walk on. But once I got that, this, I had to take the heel off because obviously it wouldn't work. And I was so lucky because once I took the trainer apart, it was, well, it's fit, and it just slipped in like that. And so I was really lucky because I didn't have the trainer first. And to sew the upper, I used my green crochet cotton. I'm going to use a blunt tapestry needle, and I knew right from the outset that I was going to use my fabric twine to make the upper, and I will link you to a fabric twine tutorial. I have my easier method of fabric twine, which is actually part of my beaded necklace, my fabric beads tutorial, but I will do a separate one specially, so you don't have to watch the fabric beads just to find the twine. But there are lots of other twine tutorials out there too. I started at the instep. I'm going to just put my needle right through there, and I thought the easiest way to put it on was just to overcast it onto the felt. And again, I don't want to go outside, I don't want to be going further on the outside of the felt, and so I just overcast and just laid my twine right the way around the edge to put the first row on. Not too far apart, but definitely coming through the edge of the thick felt. This is why you need a thickish base to be attaching the string and to be attaching this to. And my stitches are about more than 1/4 of an inch apart. And I don't want to take up too much room in here because this is obviously where my foot is going to be. But you can see I'm just going through the edge of that felt there. Pulling it nice and firm, because obviously with use, if things are a bit loose, they will go loose, and so everything needs to be sewn firmly. Oh, and for length, need 4 meters altogether. 3 meters does the first part, 3 meters does the heel and round here, and 1 meter does the top. These shoes are not even going to look matching because I can tell already that that green is not in the bit I'm pulling now, but they'll still match because they're fabric twine, so that's all I can say. So of course you see lots of people making fabric twine bowls, fabric twine coasters. I don't think anybody out there has made fabric twine shoes. So I think I'm going to give myself the award for most unusual use of fabric twine. I've got all the way round. I'm back to the very beginning where I've started, and from now on I'm just going to be sewing the twine to the row below. And the way that I'm going to do it is the way that I've made baskets out of lavender stalks before, and that is to go, I'll just get that tight because that's the join, that is to go once round the new part, so I'm just looping round there, you'll loop round there, and then once round that one and the row below. So now I'm down to the bottom one, and I just make sure it all lies in nicely. So I've come up from the bottom to the row below, so now I'm going to go just round the new bit like that. trying to hold it for the camera. So I've gone round the top bit and now I go around through the bottom bit, and that's one reason why I've got a blunt needle. I don't want to pierce the fabric, I just want to go between the layers all the time. So once round the new part, move along, and once through both of them, and it joins them together. And you can lie your piece in if you want to make a pattern. And so once through both of them, once through just the top one, once through both of them, lie it in, and once through the top one, and you're not piercing the fabric at all. And so I went round again and stacked this right on top. I didn't try to splay it out or anything. I just wanted to stack it up to make a piece of, you know, sort of to get the depth for my foot to be in. So at this stage, I would say you need to be, if you're going to be doing one of these yourself, use your own foot all the time. Keep trying it on so you can decide when to stop doing this bit and when to start making a heel. So I realised that I needed it twice. I needed two rows before I started to do the heel. It's quite nice to hold the thread where you want it to lie, and then you do make quite a nice pattern. Sort of a spiral pattern comes up, and you just keep going. Again, I'm pulling firmly. I don't want it to be loose. It needs to work as a shoe. There's no point if it's just for looks. I've finished my second round, and at this stage, this is when you need to be starting on the heel. Now, I looked and looked at shoes I already had, and I realised that the shape of them is always, the heel doesn't go straight up the back like that. Like that. It always goes inwards, and that allows your foot to stretch the heel in, and it keeps it on your foot. So it's important to start and bring your fabric twine inwards, but also I noticed that they're narrow like that, and quite often the back of a shoe is quite narrow here. It's not the same width as where the heel is down there, or else it would be flopping. It has to come up around your ankle bone. And so both of those things, as I loop back around, I'm bringing in all the time, but I'm also trying to narrow. And I think I got, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 5 layers, and then realised that actually it was still it was getting about the right narrowness, but it was still not deep enough for the back of my heel. And so this is where I would say keep trying it on. You might feel that you don't need as much depth, or you might need more depth, but I just kept putting it on until I felt that the heel was high enough, and I let myself have an extra row to go all the way around the edge. So I'm going to start and loop back. So I've got that's my second row here, and so I'm just going to start and loop that, and I'll get it really tightly sewn. So now I'm still going through, I'm on my third row, I'm still going through the row below, and then once round the new bit. So once round that loose bit, like that, and then once round in between the 2 previous rows, so that you're attaching your new row to the row below. I'm not even going to fasten off. I can actually do a Russian join like I do in knitting, because it's not going through fabric. So a Russian join like you do in knitting is you're going to lie your thread that you're coming to the end of on your hand, going to cross the new thread over, let it come underneath, and then just tie an overhand knot, which is just an normal overhand knot. So you're just tying a knot on that thread. Actually, the knot can move up and down like that. And then you're going to take the thread that's running out and you're going to tie an overhand knot onto the new thread. So under it goes, and you tie an overhand knot on there too. And then, so you've got two knots and they both can move independently. But if you pull them, you can pull them really tight together and then cut those tails off. And that's called a Russian join. It's commonly used in knitting. But I can cut those tails right back and it won't come apart. It's a really strong join. And because I'm not actually going through fabric with my blunt end needle, that knot will just sink into the fabric twine, and I don't need to be fastening off any joins. My thread to go onwards, the knot is there, but it's just going to disappear. So through the bottom, it'll just pull through nicely, and then through the top. And so now you definitely have to start and take note of the heel coming inwards, and you can see whether you need to pull in a bit. So I'm just going to make sure that this piece here is a little bit to the inside. So really what it means is that this is shorter than if it was stacked up. It needs to be shorter so it can pull in. So at this point I'm going to bend it back again. I'll secure the join as neatly as I can. Tighten it up. I've built up my heel by going backwards and forwards, and I've gone back about 1.25 inches each time. So now that I know that my heel is built up enough and I've been bringing it in, I'm going to go round the whole shoe again. I'm going to build up the toe here and go right the way round, and then I'll finish back somewhere here where the toe is. And I'm going to make sure I'm going inwards all the time so the shoe will cradle my foot and not be too loose. So you can see I've made a nice transition there, and this will be back around for one more go and then I'll probably finish it here. I've got some threads to trim, but that's okay. So that's my first part of my shoe done. Now the next part is to do the top of the foot, and if you weren't putting a sole on like this, you could attach this part straight away, and that's what I originally did. I had the whole shoe finished with the top on and the heel on before I found the trainers that I thrifted to put the outer sole on. But I'm going to go and actually make the top now, and I'm just going to start off with the same thread in my needle, and it's definitely easier to do this as a separate piece. And if you're wanting to put a sole on like I am, you have to do it as a separate piece. You can't do it at the same time, otherwise you haven't got any access under there to sew the sole onto the bottom of the shoe. So I'm not going to start with a knot because the knot won't be comfortable for my foot. So I'm just going to sew over and back until my bit is secure, and I'm going to start coiling in. So I'll coil on top, Where am I going to coil? I'm going to coil that way. I'm going to hide the raw edge underneath, and I'm just going to sew up and around to get it started. I'll go around. I'm still not going through the fabric at all. I'm just going through the middle of the coil, and now I'm going to start and coil it in. So up through the middle, going to keep my thread tight, and then I'm started, so round this part once and then back through the middle, because I'm now on my second row. Round the new bit, back through the row below. You sort of don't want a circle here, you sort of want a bit of a U shape and a flatness. And again, you need to be measuring this on your foot. Obviously not when it's this tiny, but as it starts to get bigger, put your foot in the shoe and start to see how far up your foot it's going to go, because you'll need to be confident that you've got it high enough before you start sewing it on, really. Right, I'm going to just get some new thread in here, and I'll carry on with my spiral a bit more. Now I've got my circle as big as I need to get it for the moment, and I've just manipulated it into a bit of a longer oval sort of a shape, like a flattish top. So I'm going to stop there with this. Now when I didn't have the other sole to put on, this would have been the next thing to do. So if you're not wanting to put a sole on, you just want to make a pair of slippers that you know you've made the whole thing yourself out of string and fabric, then the next thing would be to start and attach it, and then go back and forward up here to make this nice sort of a curve here to go up your foot, like that nice shape. So here's my circle here, like that, and then back and forward until it fits your foot nicely. So when I saw these in the charity shop, I'll show you what it was like. It was like this. So I feel a bit bad in one way that I cut up an old shoe, but it was, you know, it was £4. And what attracted me was that I could see that it was stitched here, and so it was a way for me to attach a proper sole. And so now I feel, well, I've got a pattern now. I knew that fit me because I tried it on at the charity shop. So this actually could be a pattern for a different type of a shoe for me to make. So I'm not going to waste anything. I took the whole thing apart, and I just was thinking, please fit, please fit. But when I put them together, they just fit in. And the only thing is, I feel sad at hiding my lovely string sole. And I can just fit it in like that, ready to sew in. It fits in beautifully. In fact, I couldn't have made my string any better of a depth, really. It just fits into that shape there. So I'm going to get my other needle. I've got my long, really sharp needle, and I've got quite a long length of this polyester wax thread, which is really strong. To sew them in, it starts off being a little bit awkward because of the way that I have my heel coming inwards like that, because I've got to get right into the back. And what I found was easiest when I did that one was to start at the heel and sew forward to the toe, and then start at the heel again and sew forward to the toe. And I felt that way I wouldn't get anything going that wasn't lined up. And I've gone up on an angle, and to me the important thing is that I'm going diagonally through the string up into the sole. I can show you on this bit better. Diagonally up through, and I come up into the sole of the felt. And that way I'm not catching this fabric in at all. I'm actually stitching the sole, and if I keep it on the top, that means the sole will be settled in. And on this, and I'm sure the bought ones are the same, you can see the holes on the inside, and that was something I got used to. The stitches are all very regular, and so I pretty soon got into the hang of where to go for the next hole. And you can feel when you're in the right place, because your needle actually does slip right through the hole. So I've got my thread coming up into the back of the heel, and I'm going to just look down there and put my needle back in to come out through the string, and then I'm going to line it up for my very first stitch, and I need to be on the right side of the heel because that's where my stitch is. So I'm going to choose that one, and you can see my needle is going perfectly nicely through there. Pulled you back because I felt I was too near. So I'm just going to settle the sole into I've settled my shoe into the rubber sole, and again I'm always going to be pulling tight. And so I'm going to do back stitch, so I'm going to go back to that hole, make sure I come through the string and up into the sole. I need my thimble definitely to push it, and I don't want to come up in the middle of the sole, so I do just check that I'm coming up just about 1/4 of an inch into the sole of the shoe. I settle it right tight in. I'm going to come forward, and at the beginning definitely you can just find where your needle's coming out from the string, and then search for the hole on the inside so that your needle comes through. And I actually didn't find it any problem to stitch at all. The main thing was absolutely pulling it tight and keeping the tension, because I felt it was important. You can see it is easy to sew once you get going. Main thing is I'm always pushing my string sole into the shoe, and then I sort of got the idea of where the holes were going to be, but you can find them, and if you miss them you can tell because your needle doesn't come through, and when you find it, it sort of gets easy and you realise you've found the hole. I'm just pulling tight every time, really tight. So you'll have to let me know whether you'll make a shoe yourself. I imagine maybe not many people will want to, but you never know. You never know. It's just ticked a thing off the list for me. I've been saying for years that I wanted to. I even kept leather off an old armchair. I can see now that I'm away from being inside the heel, this is going quicker. You can see the needles not having any bother being pulled through. Definitely needs the thimble to push it though. So that's already looking quite nice in there. It's settled in. Who'd have thought you could actually make shoes out of garden string and your fabric scraps? I'm going to get this on and then come back once I'm putting this bit on. So now that I've got my top, I've got it into a bit of a triangular shape going, and so I'm just fitting it onto here. I need it to be that little bit smaller because I need that to keep curving inwards, but I finished here, and I've just taken my thread across to the other side so that I can put it on. Just get the thing out the way, and I'm just going to line it up with the toe in the toe, I'm going to stitch it on in exactly the same method, no difference. And I'm going to get right the way round. If I can get there we go. I'm going to get right the way round, and then I'm going to keep trying it on my foot and go backwards and forwards here to just make that sort of a shape coming up so that it fits your foot. So on that part you really do need to just keep trying it and trying it. So there's my circle here, and then there's there's 4 rows of just back and forward, but I put my foot in so that I knew that I was getting that shape. I didn't want it just to be flat. I'll show you right at the end. Drum roll please. I have shoes, actual shoes that I made myself, and they can go outside and they feel like walking on clouds, and they're super comfortable. Hooray! Well, I couldn't resist that. I'm super pleased with them. Here is one. This is the one I made in front of the camera, and it's come out such a nice shape. It stays on my foot. I had to actually put an extra 2 layers here because I hadn't quite got it high enough, but I just added 2 more rows on, and until it cupped my foot. I don't think I've made that go in as much on this one, but it's just trial and error. And what I do know is that if anything happens to it, I can just repair it because I made a shoe, which is so funny. Actually, on the inside you can see the stitching there. Did actually cut out another felt inner sole, and I can just put that in like that, and then the stitching's covered up, and then it looks lovely from the inside too. So those thrifted trainer soles worked really well. That's a way of doing it. So anybody who's wanting, I'm just going to put it back on. I just have to wear them every minute of every day, everywhere I go. So if you do feel inspired to make a pair of shoes for yourself, you know that all you're going to need is a couple of balls of garden string, some of your twisted scrap twine, and a pair of soles. And you can buy them online. I have looked it up since, and you definitely can get them. But if you can thrift a pair, why not? They only cost me £3 or £4. And so that plus 2 days worth of time, and you've got your own pair of shoes that not another person in the whole wide world has got. One of a kind. With that, I'm just going to say thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing and liking and all the other things that I'm supposed to say at the end that I always forget to do, and thanks for all your support. Bye. See you till next time when you next visit Marion's world. And I'll be wearing my shoes, you can bet on that. Bye everyone.